Chapter 1, Neon Hunger. The orbital station Veyra Prime never slept. Its streets pulsed with shifting neon holograms and the endless shuffle of travelers, merchants, and smugglers from a dozen species. The tang of engine coolant mixed with the spice of fried kale root. The air always damp with recycled moisture. Overhead, translucent walkways crisscrossed like spider silk, and the distant hum of grav thrusters vibrated through the metal bones of the station. Through this chaos staggered Sorali, had drawn low over her angular Kethri features, her stomach twisted in painful knots, hunger gnawing like a living thing. Days had passed since her last proper meal, and pride, her species' one true inheritance, kept her from begging outright. But pride couldn't quiet the trembling in her legs, or the way her vision swam beneath the garish glow of merchant signs. A vendor stall caught her eye. Steaming trays of fried crustacean, thick broth swirling with protein beads. The aroma made her fangs ache. She edged closer, trying to appear casual, but her claws flexed instinctively. When the vendor's back turned, Sorali snatched at a dumpling, slick with oil. "Thief!" The shout cracked through the market. Clawed hands lunged, and she darted back, clutching the stolen food. A reptilian customer shoved her hard, sending her sprawling into the neon-soaked grime. The dumpling tumbled from her fingers, vanishing beneath the boots of strangers. Laughter followed her as she scrambled to her feet. Kethri pride reduced to a starving gutter rat. "Pathetic," she muttered under her breath, swallowing the burn of humiliation. From the crowd, a voice called, not mocking but steady, "Hey! You look like you could use a meal." She froze. A human stood at the edge of the market's glow, a man broad-shouldered but plain, his apron still dusted with spice powders. His hair was tied back, his hands scarred not from combat, but from kitchen burns. In one hand, he held a bowl of something steaming. Suspicion flared in Sorali's chest. What trick is this? Her Kethri accent made her words sharp, defensive. No trick. He crouched, offering the bowl, without flinching at her clawed fingers or the faint hiss of her breath. "It's food. Hot. Seasoned. And yours if you want it." The scent drifted up, rich broth layered with garlic, pepper, and something smoky she couldn't name. Not the sterile nutrient slates of the station, but food that lived. Her body swayed closer before her pride could stop it. "You give this freely?" The man shrugged. "I'm a chef. Feeding people is what I do. Name's Marcus." Her hands trembled as she took the bowl, too weak to pretend indifference. The first mouthful burned her tongue, but the flavor exploded across her senses, sweet, salty, alive. Her eyes watered, not from spice, but from something she hadn't felt since exile. Kindness. For the first time in cycles, Sorali's hunger eased, not just in her stomach, but in her soul. Chapter 2, The Chef's Gamble. The interior of the Hearth was nothing like the sterile eateries that lined Veyra Prime's promenades, where most stalls served ration slates and flavorless protein gels under cold lumen strips. This space glowed with warm amber light. Wooden panels, real wood, imported at absurd cost, lined the walls, and the air carried a medley of scents. Sizzling oils, smoked roots, and spices that tickled Sorali's nostrils in ways she'd never known food could. She clutched the empty bowl close to her chest, claws tapping against its surface, as if afraid it might vanish. "You can put that down," Marcus said from behind the counter, smiling faintly. "I've got 100 more like it." Sorali's ears flicked back, suspicious. "Why?" Her voice was rough, almost accusatory. "No one feeds Kethri strays without wanting something. Not here." Marcus leaned against the counter, apron smeared with sauce. "I don't see a stray. I see someone who needs a job, and I need hands. The math's simple." Her throat tightened. A job. The word carried weight among her people. Responsibility, pride, and dignity. things exile had stripped from her like flesh from bone. She narrowed her eyes. You would hire me? Hire, help, whatever word you want. Wash dishes, chop vegetables, carry trays. You work, you eat. Marcus shrugged, as if this bargain were obvious. Fair trade, right? Her instincts screamed trap. The Ketheri learned young that nothing in the galaxy came without a hidden claw. Yet there was something disarming about the human's casualness. No grand speeches, no boasts, just quiet certainty. She studied him, searching for guile. Instead, she saw tired eyes, burn scars across his forearms, and a man too stubborn to quit. Humans, she muttered, more to herself than him, always so eager to gamble. Marcus chuckled. Maybe, but my gambles usually pay off. Come on, let me show you the kitchen. She followed, each step hesitant. The kitchen was a chaos of sound and smell. Knives clattering against boards, burners humming with blue plasma, pans sizzling as oil spat firefly sparks. Sir Raleigh stiffened, instinctively cataloging the room like a battlefield. Yet her gaze kept returning to the food. Bright vegetables chopped unevenly, sauces bubbling in mismatched pots, meats charred and caramelized by hand. This is madness, she whispered. Your methods have no order. Marcus grinned, tossing chopped herbs into a pan with a theatrical flick. That's the point. Recipes are guidelines. The magic's in adjusting, adapting. A pinch more salt, less heat, a new spice. Suddenly it's different, alive. Alive. The word lingered on her tongue. Ketheri meals were measured down to the milligram. Every bite calculated for efficiency. Here, food seemed less like sustenance and more like art. Marcus handed her a knife. Your turn. Ever cooked before? She bared her teeth in a hiss. Ketheri do not lower themselves to kitchen labor. Good news. Marcus placed a cutting board in front of her. You're not Ketheri right now. You're my apprentice. And apprentices chop onions. Her pride bristled, but hunger outweighed it. She pressed claw at a blade and began slicing. The knife slipped, the cuts uneven. She cursed under her breath. Marcus only nodded. Not bad for first try. You'll get better. No mockery. No laughter. Only patience. Sir Raleigh's jaw tightened. But for the first time in years, she felt a faint spark of something unfamiliar. Hope. Chapter 3. Taste of War. The hearth began to breathe. At first, only a few curious travelers wandered in, dockhands, mechanics, merchants tired of protein slates. But word spread quickly through the station corridors. The humans had a word for it. Soul food, and whatever it was, it hooked beings across species. Sir Raleigh watched wide-eyed as a Veyran with glassy carapace mandibles licked sauce from its pincers, and a six-eyed Trascan groaned with pleasure over something Marcus called stew. The place was alive with clatter and heat, scents rising thick and heady. Sir Raleigh moved between tables, tail flicking in irritation whenever someone tried to touch it, balancing trays with awkward determination. She could feel the eyes of patrons on her, curious at the sight of a Ketheri serving food instead of sneering down from command decks. But she held her head high. Each dish set down was a small defiance against the fate her exile had dictated. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, wiping his brow, and grinned at the crowd. Not bad for Tuesday. Sir Raleigh hissed, though without malice. It is chaos, but profitable chaos. She reluctantly admitted that part. Then the door slid open, and silence rippled through the room. 3 figures entered, their armor gleaming with the crimson sigil of the Veldran Syndicate, the cartel that controlled nearly every food import into Veyra Prime. Their leader, a towering reptilian with scales like polished obsidian, strode forward, eyes narrowing at the aroma thick in the air. Marcus's smile faded, but he didn't step back. Evening. Care for a table? The reptilian's tongue flickered. Human, you cook without a license. You sell without tribute. You dare challenge Syndicate authority with your soups? His voice hissed like boiling acid. Sir Raleigh's claws flexed. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat into the shadows. This was how her exile had begun, standing against corruption, only to be cast out when her kin bowed to it. Yet when she glanced at Marcus, he wasn't bowing. He was standing there, flower on his shirt, chin raised, as though these Syndicate enforcers were nothing more than rude customers. "This isn't about licenses," Marcus said, his voice calm but steady. "It's about feeding people who are hungry. That's what a restaurant does." The reptilian leaned close, breath hot and rancid. "You will close this hearth, or we will burn it to ash with you inside." Gasps rippled through the alien patrons. Some slipped out quickly, tails between their legs. Sir Raleigh's pulse hammered. This was the moment to run, to vanish before the firestorm. It was a Kethri way. Survive, even if pride burns. But Marcus didn't move. He simply turned, ladled broth into a bowl, and said on the counter between them, "Before you make threats, try it. If it doesn't change your mind, then do what you think you need to." The silence was suffocating. Sir Raleigh could hardly breathe. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't logic. This was something uniquely, maddeningly human, to gamble not with weapons, but with a bowl of food. And as Sir Raleigh stood frozen, torn between flight and fight, she realized with jolt, Marcus was giving her a choice too, to run as she always had, or to stand, this time, at his side. Chapter 4. The Knife and the Fire. The attack came at shift change, when the station's corridors were crowded with weary dockhands and blinking neon adverts. Sir Raleigh sensed it before it began. The air seemed too still, the crowd too conveniently thinned. Her ears twitched as shadows moved in the alley behind the hearth. The door burst inward. 3 Syndicate enforcers stormed through, armored plating glinting under the amber glow. Plasma batons hissed to life, humming with lethal charge. One snarled in a guttural tongue, shoving tables aside, scattering bowls and terrified patrons. Marcus didn't retreat. He simply reached behind the counter and drew the first thing his hand found, a chef's knife, blade catching the light like silver fire. Sir Raleigh hissed instinctively, claws sliding free. "You fool! You are no warrior. Never claimed to be." Marcus gritted his teeth, stance awkward but unyielding. "But this is my kitchen." The first thug lunged. Sir Raleigh reacted on instinct, tail whipping around, slamming into the enforcer's knees. The alien toppled, baton clattering across the floor. In a blur, she was on him, claws raking against armor seams, sparks flying. Another thug swung at Marcus. He ducked, the plasma baton slicing a glowing arc through the air where his head had been. He surged forward, knife flashing, clumsy, untrained, but with the sheer, bull-headed force of someone who refused to bend. The blade bit into exposed flesh at the enforcer's arm, earning a guttural roar. The fight spilled into the back corridor, gravity faltering as the station's old stabilizers groaned. For a heartbeat the world tilted, bowls, utensils, and droplets of sauce floated around them, suspended like stars. Sir Raleigh twisted in the low gravity with practiced grace, tail anchoring her as she slashed across a thug's throat guard. Blood beaded in the air, scarlet spheres drifting. Marcus, less graceful, slammed into a wall, gasping, but he kicked off and launched himself forward with stubborn momentum, driving his shoulder into another enforcer's gut. The two of them tumbled together in slow-motion violence, crashing into shells of preserved spices that burst like clouds. The scent of cumin, pepper, and alien herbs filled the air, cloying and thick. Sir Raleigh spun in a haze, her claws slicing through the last thug's visor. He screamed, tumbling backward into the corridor's flickering lights. Then silence. The corridor reeked of ozone and blood, floating in weightless globules. Sirali panted, ears flat, her body thrumming with the primal rush of survival. She turned toward Marcus and froze. He was slumped against the wall, knife still clenched white-knuckled in his hand. A dark stain spread across his apron, blood pooling where the plasma baton had grazed aside. His face was pale, lips pressed tight against the pain. Marcus. She darted to him, claws trembling as she gripped his shoulder. Why didn't you run? You could have died. He gave a weak grin, voice rough. Because it's mine. This place. Our place. You don't run from that. Her chest constricted. No Kethri would have fought for a kitchen. No Kethri would bleed for food or for an outcast ally. And yet this human had stood, foolish and brave, against an empire's enforcers armed with nothing but a cook's knife and stubbornness. As his eyes fluttered, Sirali realized she faced a choice she could no longer delay. She could flee as always, or she could stay and fight, not just for Marcus, but for the one place that had ever given her more than survival. For the first time since her exile, Sirali chose not to run. Chapter 5. Loyalty's Flavor. Veyra Prime's underbelly smelled of rust, oil, and old despair. Sirali moved through it with her hood pulled tight. Marcus's blood still dried on her claws, each step echoing with guilt. He lay in the Hearth's back room, stitched and bandaged, his breath shallow. Every time his face tightened in pain, her stomach twisted. She could not fight plasma wounds with claws, but she could fight in another way. The Syndicate thought humans stood alone. They hadn't counted on what Marcus had given others. Small acts, unnoticed kindnesses. Sirali found the first ally in a dockhand who remembered the time Marcus had cooked a free meal when his pay was docked. Then the insectoid courier whose mandibles still clicked at the memory of Marcus serving him when everyone else turned him away. Word spread faster than she expected. One by one, they came, station workers, smugglers, merchants on the Syndicate's blacklist, even street urchins who had scavenged scraps from Marcus's kitchen bins. They gathered in the dim light of an abandoned cargo bay, the hum of Starship engines thrumming through the walls like a heartbeat. Sirali stood before them, her pride coiled tight in her chest. Speaking to strangers was harder than any fight. Her voice cracked at first. You all know what the Syndicate does. You've lived under their boot. Same as I. They wanted Marcus gone because he offered something they couldn't control. He gave us food that meant more than survival. He gave us dignity. Aliens of a dozen shapes shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. Dignity was not a word traded on Veyra Prime. Her claws flexed. Kethri teach that loyalty is a bond of blood, that exile erases it. But humans, she swallowed, forcing the words past a knot in her throat. Humans give loyalty not by blood, but by choice. Marcus chose to stand for me when no one else would. Now I choose to stand for him. Silence stretched. Then, slowly, the dockhand lifted a scarred hand. I'll help rebuild it. The insectoid courier clicked its mandibles. And I'll run supplies. One by one, voices rose. A mechanic promised to fix the battered gravstoves. A street urchin offered to watch for Syndicate patrols. The broken and forgotten, bound not by clan or contract, but by the stubborn spark Marcus had lit in them. Days blurred into sweat and labor. Sirali hauled crates, her muscles burning, while others hammered panels back into place. The Hearth's broken tables were replaced with scavenged metal polished until they shone. Marcus's recipes, half burned in the fight, were pieced together from memory by Sirali's claws scratching across datapads. She cooked, too, awkwardly at first, but with growing confidence, adding her people's sharp herbs to Marcus's soft stews, discovering flavors that made even hardened smugglers weep. When Marcus finally limped into the kitchen, pale but alive, the place roared with life again. every seat filled, every hand clapping in rhythm. Sorali stood at his side, apron tied clumsily around her lean frame, and for the first time she felt something she had thought exile stripped forever, not just survival, belonging. And as she watched the crowd raise their bowls together in defiance of the Syndicate, Sorali realized what made humans terrified was not their technology or their weapons. It was that they could make loyalty contagious. Chapter 6, More Than Survival. The hearth pulsed with life again. Steam curled from simmering pots, the scent of roasted meats and herbs spilling into the neon-lit street outside. Patrons crowded the tables, dockhands shoulder to shoulder with insectoid couriers, smugglers swapping stories beside traders draped in silks. The Syndicate hadn't returned, not openly. Their grip on the station still lingered, but here, inside these walls, they no longer held dominion. Sorali leaned against the counter, her claws nicked from kitchen work, apron stained in a way that once would have shamed her. Now she wore those stains like battle scars. She caught herself smiling as she passed steaming bowls to eager hands. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, limping but upright, his apron tied snug over bandaged ribs. The room quieted, then erupted into cheers. He waved it off, grinning, but his eyes sought Sorali's across the crowd. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, defiance, and something softer, still unnamed. Later, when the last bowl was cleared and the lanterns dimmed, they stepped out beneath the station's dome. Artificial stars glittered above, programmed to mimic the constellations of long-forgotten skies. The air was still tinged with metal and ozone, but here in the quiet, it felt almost like peace. "You rebuilt it," Marcus said, voice low, rough with awe. Sorali's ears twitched. "We rebuilt it. I only rallied those you had already touched with your human stubbornness." She let out a breath, tail swishing softly. Kethri exile means losing every bond. I thought that was the end of me. But you? She struggled. Pride war with honesty. You show me loyalty can be chosen, that it can be stronger than blood. Marcus leaned against the railing, gazing out at the endless dark beyond the dome. Back on Earth, food was never just fuel. It was family, tradition, comfort. Maybe that's what makes us special. He glanced at her, eyes soft. We can take hunger and turn it into belonging. For a long moment, Sorali said nothing. Her chest ached with something heavier than pride, lighter than despair. She looked at him, at the scar on his jaw from the Syndicate fight, at the way his hands were still rough from years of knives and flame. A human, fragile, foolish, endlessly stubborn. Yet he had done what her own people had never managed. He had made her feel whole. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. For the first time in many cycles, Marcus hailed, "I do not feel hungry." He smiled, weary but warm, and rested his hand gently on hers. Beyond the dome, the stars wheeled silently. Inside, two exiles, one human, one alien, stood together, no longer defined by desperation, but by the strange, indomitable fire that made survival something more. The hum of Veyra Prime's engines thrummed beneath the floor as Sorali stood by the viewport, the artificial stars glimmering like 1,000 unfamiliar constellations. Beyond the dome, freighters drifted through neon space lanes, their hulls glowing with crimson thrusters. Below, the city glowed with alien voices, laughter, and a faint pulse of artificial gravity cycling through the station's bones. Beside her, Marcus rested an elbow on the railing, his apron gone, his bandages finally healed. The hearth, rebuilt and thriving, buzzed behind them with clinking glasses and warm chatter. But here, in the quiet, it was just them, an exile who had lost everything, and a human who had gambled everything. Sorali exhaled, her breath fogging faintly on the glass. "I thought hunger would define me forever. But you," her voice faltered, then steadied, You taught me that hunger can end and that belonging can be chosen. Marcus turned, his tired smile softened by the glow of distant suns. That's what we humans do best. We turn scraps into meals, strangers into family. Silence stretched, but it was warm now, not hollow. Slowly, Sorali laid her clawed hand over his, the gesture awkward yet deliberate. The viewport reflected them together. Alien and human, survivor and dreamer. For the first time, Sorali whispered, voice trembling with something deeper than pride. I am full. Marcus squeezed her hand. The hum of the station carried his reply like a vow. Then we'll never go hungry again. Beyond them, the stars shifted, vast, endless, waiting.